gumshoes. And this question keeps coming up. What is a gumshoe? It's just a crime aficionado or a detective. It's kind of an old term. I'm just going to give people a few minutes to arrive, and then we will go ahead and get started. So we will start at the top of the day, and then I have a spot of tea to share, but I don't want to share it before people arrive. So I'll just get started with the review, then we'll hit the tea, and then I'll hit the top news, at least from my perspective. I mean, that's what I'm here for. I like that people have noted that my approach is a little different from a lot of YouTube creators. One, it kind of has more of a personal feel, but then also I tend to point out things that are interesting and that are interesting to me in light of the data that we have around the case and timeline. And anytime something answers questions, like outstanding questions that I may have had or may have been asked. There were also a couple observations that Janice made today that I was just like, oh, wow. Okay, we are definitely hitting on those. So I will start off with, actually, I'm going to start off with the tea. We have a few people in here, and if you join late, you may want to rewind. So I know from a very reliable confidential source that Emma Daybell also referred to Lori as mom. So I can't share the details of that, but it is a very, very reliable source. And I did ask the source if I could share it, and was given permission to share it. But it's significant to me, not just because it's scintillating. It's not gossip. I think it's significant. I think it points to what was Emma getting out of this? Did she really need another mother? Like, there are some people who got caught up in this that I think, this person was vulnerable, very, very vulnerable. And I was talking to someone today about Melanie Gibb, and this person confirmed that, Melanie Gibb, and I've talked about this before. I think Melanie Gibb, some of her behavior, not that I excuse any of it, but some of it suggests pretty significant trauma, most likely childhood trauma, because she just has some tells that and I don't mean it in any kind of mean or disrespectful way. It was one of the things that even when I called her out in my openish letter, I was, cautious about, but because I never want to be cruel. And so I think, people like Melanie Gibb and, like Alex, I think he had different vulnerabilities, I think, but I think his main vulnerability is that he was so obviously very slow. I mean, even it's obvious from his communications, and, he wasn't just a really weird dude. I think there was really significant damage there. And, hearing about the car accident where, reportedly, he didn't get any medical care. He had a significant head injury. And as the story goes, I think Barry just picked him up, just like left the truck that was totaled on the side of the road. And I forget who it was, maybe Megan. I'm not sure who shared the story, but they didn't, like, Barry didn't believe in health insurance, and so Alex didn't get medical care, as the story goes. And so I'm sure that was a factor, but I do also know from a confidential source who was close to Lori through childhood right up until about midway through high school that he already had really significant issues. Like he was a creepy guy, and Adam was mostly tasked with kind of keeping him under control and out of trouble when Barry and Janice would jet set off to Hawaii, which apparently, according to this person, was a pattern. And then like Stacy and Adam were left to like babysit the younger ones and stuff. But anyway, so so there were some people who were pulled into this because of significant vulnerabilities. I mean, you would have to have some pretty significant damage to allow someone who was younger to like say, oh yeah, I was your mother in a previous probation. And we know that Melanie Gibb even called her mom. I'm sure others did too. We know Melanie Boudreau called her mama. We know Ian Pulowski called Chad dad. So I just think like they've just all had this very unusual family. But I think with Emma, and I might be biased because everything we've heard has been that Tammy may have had her issues as a mother. We all do, but she was nurturing. She was involved in her kids' lives. So, what would the draw have been to actually like allow this woman to come in and most likely play a role in her mother's murder, and for her to actually like kind of give Lori the honor that she withheld from her own mother? And I never want to be unfair. I don't think I'm being unfair. I think her motive, from what I can tell now, of course there may be other things at play, but from what I've seen, I think Emma's motive was pure unadulterated greed. I think that Lori and Chad were paying off all their kids. We probably won't ever know the full extent. We know even with Colby, she had 2 Cash App accounts. So not only was Colby receiving all of Tylee's Social Security money, which we heard about today, but he was also receiving money from Lori's Cash App accounts. And, I suspect because those details were withheld, it was probably a significant amount. Now, that might be a bad assumption. I just don't think it is, because I think that Chad and Lori were just pouring out money. Like they were just bleeding money just to keep all their kids silent and cooperative. So anyway, so that's the tea. Emma called Lori mom. The highlight for me today, I'll kick off with that. It actually came at the very end. We found out that the state turned over the raw data file from the extraction file from Charles' phone. Anyone who's been following the channel knows that I've had strong opinions about this. I just did not think that the state was going to be able to justify this. They still may have grounds for appeals. What I haven't been able to find out is when Lori first asked for the extraction file. I asked Justin Lum. He hasn't been able to track it down. I need to reach out to Nate Eaton. If maybe one of my mods can remind me. It's just with Arizona, it's much more difficult to find these filings. With Idaho, it was really easy, and I was able to, track all of these filings, but they're just not readily available to normal everyday citizens in Arizona. So I'd probably have to like sign up as like media or something like that. But so I don't know when the defense first asked for them, but what I was very concerned about was the state's attempts at like justifying handing over a reader file. So, and I've talked about, the limitations of a reader file, and they made it sound like, oh well, it's like they don't even have to pay for Cellbrite. They can use the free reader version with this reader file. But the reader file, apparently, according to ChatGPT, it doesn't include deleted messages. It doesn't include metadata. It doesn't include a lot. And anyway, so I had a bit of a repartee with someone over the comments, and I really enjoyed it. Like, the person clearly knew the law, because they came in with, Brady doesn't require that we turn over everything, and there can be, obviously private messages, there can be intimate messages, and you have to protect the victims. And everything I read was like, yes, absolutely. The law makes allowances for that. You can also include like a log of of files that were withheld, or line items of files that were withheld. They could also like say like, oh, this is redacted, intimate, not relevant. And then that gives the defense the opportunity to actually call a hearing with the judge to review that content, just to make sure that it really isn't relevant and there's no exculpatory information. But if you just like, like kind of take a shortcut, like, we're just going to give you this reader file, and then that gives Chandler Police the opportunity to like kind of rifle through all of the data. And I forget, there was a mention, let me check my notes. It was somewhere during the trial. Let me just that like, I think it was like, I don't want to exaggerate, but it was many gigabytes of data were in this extraction file, because he had the phone for so long, and he was very, very active on his phone. And so they were saying, hey, it's a significant amount of data. But anyway, but then there was a discussion about like the defense didn't know how to open it. Like, they were saying it doesn't open. Well, and someone had said like, you can't, I was sitting there like, you can't just double click on a raw data file. Like, they have to actually, pay for Cellbrite and import this data. But the guy who was, at Lori's table, who was addressing this, he was like, well, the Cellbrite that the state sent us, like, it was an older version, then we got the newer version. Trina's like, we didn't send you Cellbrite. Like, that's the software. So, I mean, it was like the myopic leading the blind, because like, I'm listening to them, and the judge, like, I think he was being very fair. He said, to Trina K, well, maybe the state could make someone available to the defense, to help them, figure out how to open and access this file. And but Trina was kind of like, she was kind of prickly about it. Like, I don't know why we're still talking about this. Well, you just provided the data, you know? So I think she was like, hey, they wanted the raw data. They can figure it out themselves. And so then the defense was like, hey, maybe you could make Detective McDonald, the one who testified about the raw data, maybe make him available. So that seemed like a very fair compromise. And also, like, we're coming up on the end of the trial, so it still may be an appealable issue, because at this point, like, they've already, I think they maybe have 5 witnesses left. So I think the state is planning to rest on Thursday, and so then it was kind of funny because the judge said something to the effect of, well, this isn't really like pertinent to this trial, like this is mostly for the next trial. And I was like, you were doing so well. Like, this data is not going to help with the next trial. This is Charles extraction data. This was Charles' phone. Like, they may be able to use some of it, but like, it's going to have very little bearing on Brandon's trial, so yeah, it's just so interesting hearing like non-technical people like talk about some of this stuff. But anyway, so that's that. I think I think it was good. I think it shows good faith. It may be too little, too late, because it's a significant amount of data. Like, they won't be able to do anything with much of anything with it for this trial. But anyway, but hopefully they'll avoid this mistake for the next trial. Okay, so moving ahead, I'm wearing this leather blazer because I don't have access to a thermostat. So I just have like cold, dry air blowing on me. I will also be relying very heavily on cough drops and more water because I am not used to all this dryness. So, okay. Let me go through my notes. One thing that was interesting was Dr. Bumgarner. He was the medical examiner who examined Charles. So there was there were questions earlier in the trial, which was just last week, about if there was stippling in either of the wounds. Well, I checked the ME's report, and it had specifically said it didn't address stippling at all for the chest wound, which was the first shot. But it did say for the abdominal wound, the second shot, that was the shored wound that was like up against the floor, most likely. That actually said that there wasn't stippling. But we found out today that there was stippling around the chest wound. And he noted that he didn't use the word stippling in the report, but described it. So I don't know what the purpose of that was, but stippling is a good indicator of the distance between the muzzle of the gun and the wound. And the stippling range can be anywhere from 1 inch to 4 to 5 feet. The closer the gun is to the victim, in general, the more stippling there is. And there's also an increase in the likelihood of seeing soot. So there was no soot around that wound. So he estimated that Alex was 2 to 4 feet away when he shot Charles the first time. It was also, dare I say, interesting. Like it was sad because I'm looking at a man I knew, and a man who was very kind to my family. It was a learning experience to like to learn about like the differences between an entrance wound and an exit wound. And so, he's describing the difference, but then we were actually seeing it. So he said like an entrance wound tends to be more round, and an exit wound tends to be, I forget the word he used for it, but it was like it's more angled. But anyway, so now the one thing I question is and we already knew this, there were abrasions on Charles' knees. So the ME agreed with Trina that one possible explanation for that was that Charles fell to his knees. But then my question is, if he fell to his knees, I mean, the first shot, it hit his heart. And one very sad detail that he shared was when a victim experiences a gunshot wound that goes through the heart, they generally have seconds to, I think he said, no more than 2 minutes to live. It would be very rare for someone to survive that shot. But in my thinking, if he got shot and he fell to his knees, so I'll just say, I've said this before, I do not believe that there was a fight. I really believe he walked in and was just gunned down. I believe that the bat, all of that was introduced later to try to justify him having shot Charles. And we also know from the woman Debbie, who was married very briefly to Alex, that this was something that he had tried to do with Joe. He had planned to do. He wanted to kind of lure him into a fight and then shoot him and claim self-defense. So in my mind, Debbie is an absolute hero. She gave up privacy, where you see so many people not going to police, not even people now who claim that they were so close to Charles. And it's like, why didn't you go to police? Why didn't you advocate for him? So, and same, friends, family members. It was like so few people initiated going to the police. And then you have this woman who was married to Alex for a very brief period of time. And now I think she thought that her privacy would be maintained more than it was. But here she comes forward to aid in the investigation, to say, hey, you know what? I know that this is what he planned to do with Joe. But anyway, so excuse me, he's shot in the heart, falls forward, one potential explanation, scrapes his knees. Then how in the world did he end up on his back, kind of like almost like in a messianic position? I just, because it seems to me like if he fell forward to his knees, and I know some people have proposed that, like someone may have like forced him to get down on his knees, but actually seeing the abrasions to his knees, I just don't think that, like, I think it was a significant, like something caused that amount of that amount of an abrasion. Like, because just a few months ago, I was out on a run. This guy was walking his two dogs. I went to go around him. One of his dogs, shot right in front of me, and I was like, I'm either going to step on this dog or like pull, try to pull out of this in time, which I didn't step on the dog, but I did fall on the sidewalk and scuffed my knee, and I still have a scar from it, and so anyway, so when I looked at those scuffs on his knees, I'm like, they're more significant than I thought they would be. So given the fact that it is also a wood floor, like there wasn't as much friction as like I encountered, actually falling on a sidewalk. So I just think that there was like a significant amount of force to cause that. But then gravity, in my mind, I can't picture a scenario where he would have fallen on his knees and then fell backwards, because we know he was down for that second shot, because of the shored wound, and the ME did explain much more the signs of a shored wound. He said it was textbook. And anyway, so yeah, that's a question I have that will, I'm sure, never be answered. Okay, Lori, when she questioned him on cross, she asked about like what they test for, and he mentioned 16 to 20 substances, like recreational drugs, medications, things like acetone, and things like that. And then Lori asked, would testosterone or growth hormones show up in the toxicology report? And he said no. But to me, I was like, first of all, I doubt the jury picked up what she was putting down. It seemed like a weak attempt at suggesting roid rage. I just don't know, where else that would have gone. But next up was Mark Sorry with Social Security. He is part of a team that investigates fraud, waste, and abuse with Social Security. There weren't a lot of new details. Like a lot of it, we just already know. From the other trials. One thing he did say is he explained that with a minor like Tylee, a parent is assigned as a representative payee. And so the benefits are put into an account that can be accessed by both the parent and the child. And so, I mean, clearly in the end, Tylee had no access to those benefits. He also explained there was he explained more of like the mother, child, and care benefit. That's what she would have had for JJ, and she was no longer eligible for that benefit once she married Chad. Obviously, she wasn't eligible for anything because at that time, because the children were already dead. But she was questioned about if she and Charles were living together at the time of his death, and she confirmed they were. So I didn't know she had lied about that. Another thing I noted, so I mentioned on Thursday that I had found somewhere in one of the reports an unredacted address for Alex. And the address she put on the form was it was like close to Alex's address, but it was bogus. The street number was wrong and the spelling of the street was wrong. So it just seemed like a fake address, but possibly like one that she would have some plausible deniability, like in claiming like, oh yeah, I'm I just don't know how to spell or whatever. But a letter was sent to that address on September 21st. I suspect that, at this point, like, when people have access to services like that, whether it's like, any kind of like state services, federal services, insurance, for years, I mean, they've had portals, like actual portals. And there's so many times I work with clients and we're talking about portals, and it's very distracting. But but these portals give you access, so that you're not dependent on receiving bills or whatever through the mail. And so I suspect she either saw the money drop in her account, or had a message in her portal that the benefits, that she was deemed eligible for these benefits. For JJ, the thing that Janice pointed out was this was September 21st, and that she received, at least that it went out. I do suspect somehow she knew that the benefits had been granted. It might have even just been an email or something. But and JJ, I agree with Janice. It was like, okay, then I think that's when she was like, all right, now JJ can go. Because I wondered, like, why the span of time between Tylee's murder and JJ's murder? Like, Chad, I covered this in the live that I did about Chad's evolution on his death percentages, but he was very resistant to assigning JJ a 0 death percentage, where Lori was really, really pushing him, but he had already done that in August. So why the delay? And I suspect this is the reason for the delay. She had to make sure that there was nothing she needed to do to prove that she had JJ. Another new thing I learned is that if there had been a transfer of guardianship, whoever was the guardian would have received that benefit. So anyway, that was that. Robin Smith Scott, she was the claims representative from Banner. There wasn't anything new from that I can really think about. I mean, we have a solid date that Charles changed the beneficiary from Lori to Kay, February 26th. One thing that wasn't mentioned, which was brought up in one of the other trials, maybe Chad's trial, is that for a period of time, he had when Lori moved back in with him, he had switched it back to Lori. So that, I don't think that was mentioned today. But then Jeff Moberg, he was, I think, with the Department of Safety. he was a fascinating witness. Like, if you're into like technical things and just like learning, he was an incredible presenter of information. He was affable, he was very knowledgeable and very well spoken. He would get a question, and understandably, most witnesses, they get up on the witness stand and they're just kind of like, it's just like, it's so nerve-wracking. They just look a little deer in the headlights. Not Mr. Moberg. I don't know if he just testifies a lot, but he would get a question and then he would just turn to the jury and he explained things very, very well. So I really enjoyed his testimony because it was just so interesting. But one thing I was kind of gunning for, bad choice of words. One thing I was, questioning when he was testifying was, are we going to address the 800-pound elephant in the middle of the room, that bullet, or round technically, that did not look like it was expanded and, according to the fire chief, was not particularly misshapen. And in fact, so one, someone who is part of the community here, the Cool Cats community, she shared with me. Her name's Kim Schmidt, and yeah, I mean, she's just another eagle eye, like Janice. The two of them, they just see things that like most normal people don't see. Not suggesting they're not normal. Janice, jury's still out, but yeah. So so she shared these pictures from the police report, and I asked Kim. I was like, "Where did you get these?" And she was like, "From you." So apparently, I shared these pictures with her, but then I must not have moved them into the folder where I keep the police report. But anyway, so I am going to share my screen. And in the pictures that she shared with me today, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so perfect. This was the round that I believe this was the round that was, I mean, there weren't explanations, but this looks like the round that was just sitting in the middle of the floor. Even Detective Coombs had noted that the deformation of it was limited to, like, this part here is normally round, and he said it was oval. And then the police report said there was a red substance on it. So I don't know if that's here. Again, we don't have anything that says this was pulled from the middle of the room. But the round that was pulled out of the baseboard was significantly misshapen, and because it went into actual wood. So, all right, let me go back. So he didn't address that. Like, it was almost like, don't ask, don't tell. Like, Trina didn't ask about it, so of course he wasn't going to testify to it. And so I wondered if Lori would, but it kind of makes sense. She's not particularly motivated to ask about it either. So, like, he confirmed things like the shell casings that were along the west wall, along that mirrored wall, and that they did come from Alex's gun. Another thing though is, I've already talked about how, like, the first shot, Alex had said he was just inside the room. So just like a little bit in from the hallway, and shot Charles at a northeasterly angle, So if you're not familiar with that picture, I don't have it here in front of me. But so I had already questioned, like, how many times would you have to shoot that gun for it to eject to the right, which he did, confirm. We already knew from Detective Coons that Alex's gun ejected to the right. One thing that he added is that Detective Coons said sometimes it shoots up and to the right, and sometimes it shoots like kind of down and to the right. And so he confirmed that Alex's gun shoots up and to the right. So, I was like, how many times would you have to shoot a gun for the shell casing to hit that curved wall that was like the other side of it was a kitchen, and it just like had this, curvature to it. Like, it would make sense to me that it would hit that wall and like, hit the wall at an angle and then end up in the middle of that dance room, not on the other side of Charles' body. So it would have had to hit the wall to the right and fly over, Alex's head or in front of him, over Charles' body and land against that wall. So I was like, this just doesn't make sense. I mean, I suppose it's like remotely possible, but I mean, it's remote. However, the second shot, it's impossible, because for the second shot, that's the shored wound. Charles was almost parallel to the west wall. So imagine, this is the west wall here. He's like, a little bit at an angle, like maybe a 25-degree angle, something like that. But and we heard from the ME that the shooter would have had to be standing at Charles' feet, and would have shot down. Well, that casing definitely would have shot to the east side of the room. There was nothing there that would have, caused the casing to then, like, there was nothing for it to bounce off of. Like, it was already ill-conceived that it would bounce off the wall and over Charles' body. But the second shot, it's outside the realm of possibility. It should have been, like somewhere between where they were standing on the west side of the room, technically the southwest side of the room. That's where the shooter was standing. I say shooter because I'm not 100% that Alex took the second shot, but it would have shot to the right. So, and I mentioned in another live that on day 2 of Detective Coons' testimony, and I mean no disrespect to Trina K. I mean, I think she did a fantastic job today, really, really fantastic. But she had said something like, or, like, this was like day 2 of Detective Coons coming in as an expert witness saying, yep, everything checks out. And then she's like, or someone could have kicked the casings. And in my opinion, he looked a little shell-shocked. Again, terrible choice of words. But like, I suppose it's possible and stuff. But again, it really wasn't possible, because at least not with the story that they gave. It wouldn't be aligned with the story that Alex gave. And because you couldn't just, like, if it's in the middle of the room, like, they would have had to kick it in such a way that, like, it went airborne and actually jumped over Charles' body. So I just don't think that that's feasible. So then the only other possibility that I could think of that would have the shooter in the same room is the shell casing would have had to land on the north side of the room, like, so, like, where you come in the front door, like, and where Charles' hat was, that was the north side of the room. because then you could have kicked it and it could have like gone in between Charles' body and that west wall. But no one's story matched a scenario where the bullet would have been on the, that the shooter would have been on the north side of the room. And with that shored wound, which suggested strong directionality, it entered his abdomen, it exited his shoulder, um, and then with the scarring on the floor. And in the pictures that Kim gave me, you could see it's a much better picture of the scarring on the floor, and it is bigger than the other two divots. So, I wondered, even when Lori was showing that, I was like, and it's also far away. But in fact, let me see if I can pull that up. So it doesn't seem fair to mention it and not pull it up. So let me see here. Okay, so this will just take a second. A3. Okay. Let me share my screen. So here, you don't see the divots that Lori showed, because she showed divots that were over here. So the divots that were over here may have been a little bigger, but this was the directionality. And so and between that, which pointed to the northeast, and the trajectory of the wound path through Charles' body, clearly the shooter was at Charles' feet. And so it's my point is, there was nothing that explained the position of the bullet casings, in my opinion. So, but we just avoided that whole topic, which, it was notable. Okay. Moving ahead to Detective Inclin. She was with Chandler Police, obviously. She was the one who interviewed both Lori and Tylee. We had already known from, I believe it was Trina's opening statements, that Lori and Tylee actually met with a victim's advocate, or was it a victim's advocate? Yeah. While they were at Chandler Police. That was distressing to me, just because I just thought, from Tylee's perspective, she must have seen, like, everyone is under her mom's spell. The fact that, I'm sure she knew her mom was responsible for this, and and for her mom to, come through like, sunshine and roses, and be treated as a victim. That was hard to process. Not that it matters, but Trina played key parts of Lori's interview, and I love that she included a clip where Lori explained that JJ was a drug baby. We know that Melanie Gibb also used that horrendous, terminology, and so, and again, like, it's just wild, some of the overlaps. But we adopted a child who was born addicted. And so to hear someone refer to a baby as a drug baby is just so reprehensible. Like it's so dehumanizing. Anyway, so you could definitely tell, even in that interview, that there had been a severing of that mother-child bond with JJ. And Trina also asked, I was kind of surprised by this. And I was like, you go, girl. She asked Detective Inclin if she questioned Lori's claim that she found Charles' phone in the car when they were supposedly fighting over it in the house. And only, like Lori was the only one who walked out of that fight alive, of the two of them. So obviously, the only way that Charles' phone could have made it into his car would have been for one of them to carry it to the car. But Lori told Detective Inclin that she found it in Charles' car. So Trina asked, something to the effect of, like, she questioned that. And it seemed like Detective Inclin was a little steely. She was pretty steely through much of her interview, but she just said it was unusual. And I was like, this gives Melanie Gibb. But Melanie Gibb talking about Lori moving to Rexburg while Tammy was still alive. She was like, it was unusual. Okay. So I wondered. So Trina had said in her opening statement that, the jury would hear that when Lori was given the death notification that her husband had not survived the shooting, Lori had told the detective she already knew that because she was there. Like, she knew Charles was dead because she was there. And Janice pointed out, if Lori already knew that Charles was dead, and Chandler police knew that Lori knew, then they would have known that the timing of Alex's 911 call was off, because there was a significant amount of time that passed from the time that Charles' phone left the house with Lori and Alex placed the 911 call. I also thought it was really good that Trina asked, because I think that, like, sometimes we can become anesthetized to some of the details of the story. She asked, did Lori call 911? And Detective Inclin, of course, said no. And I was like, wow, that's a really good point. Like, Lori also could have called 911. And she didn't. So Lori's questions, like, yeah. She did say, did you treat us like we were victims? And Detective Inclin said yes. And then she just asked, I didn't know the detail that Lori had asked to be able to get Tylee's medication. And apparently she was on, like, a panic medication to help with, like, panic attacks. And and they weren't able to go in to get anything, Detective Inclin explained, because they didn't have a search warrant. So they couldn't even enter the house without the search warrant, but they certainly couldn't let her go into the crime scene. So Lori was trying to make it sound like they did Tylee dirty by not providing, allowing Lori to get her medicine. But in my mind, I'm like, well, you planned this whole thing. If you wanted to ensure that, Tylee wouldn't have a panic attack and you would have a calmer teen to coach that entire time. They were in the car, and even just driving from the house to, I mentioned that Janice and I retraced Lori's steps from that day, because I did a live where I had taken all the GPS coordinates and all that, and had done a live of like retracing the steps. And one thing that was surprising to both of us is just how far away Life Academy was. And it's a beautiful, beautiful campus. But yeah, so yeah, I just thought of like Tylee just being like a captive audience that whole time, and Lori just coaching her and stuff. But anyway, so I just thought, obviously it was disingenuous at best for Lori to be like trying to suggest that Detective Inklin somehow wasn't looking out for Tylee, or didn't do enough, or impinge on her ability to properly parent and protect Tylee, since obviously Lori would have been the one causing Tylee significant distress. So anyway, so those were my my strongest impressions. And on that note, I will take some questions. One of my mods, Anna, she's so helpful. She she compiled all of the leftover questions from I think it was Thursday's live, and then I think there were some from yesterday's live. I did a live where I just talked about Adam's testimony, specifically, that point about, okay, so why was their family meeting up in early 2018 when it wasn't for Colby's wedding? And I had suggested that is also when Joe died. And and anyway, so there were also questions left over from that. But okay, so someone asked, oh, that question I actually already answered. Someone said, I've been thinking about the second bullet trajectory. Do you think the paramedics or their equipment could have moved it? No, I think I answered this question, but no, there was someone who was assigned to go in and document, like, each piece of evidence, put down tents, that like these little tents where they gave each item an ID, and then the EMTs, the fire, the people who were there from the fire department, as well as the patrol officers, were instructed to steer clear of the evidence. Yeah, so some of these, let's see. What if this ended in a hung jury? It could. Yeah, it could. So far, like, I think if we were trying to prove that Charles was murdered and it wasn't self-defense, they would have a solid shot. But to date, and I don't know, like maybe Arizona jurors are like less discriminating. I just know, from the cases, the trials in Idaho, it was very interesting listening to the jurors and just how seriously they took their responsibility, and some of the things that I was concerned about, like, they also noted that made their decision, especially regarding Tylee and Tammy, like Lori's role in Tylee and Tammy's murders, more difficult to kind of all get on the same page with. So at this point, I don't really anticipate like that a jury would be able to say that the state has met the burden of proof, to prove conspiracy beyond reasonable doubt. But I think Trina said they expect arrest on Thursday. So they still have a few more days. So I don't know, but it could end in a hung jury, or even an acquittal. I think I mentioned, like, I mean, my mods, the mods on this channel, they're not my mods, but they're the A Murderous Heart mods. They are some of the most wonderful women I've had the pleasure of calling friends, and one of them knew that I was really kind of twisted up about some detail in the trial, and she just reminded me in a really kind, gentle way, like, just keep in mind, she's never getting out, and so it did really help me, because it's like I've used that to like kind of tether me, because I can just and just get all tangled up in the technicalities, and like, you know where's the evidence for this? Where's the evidence for this? And at times, like, why did this go to trial? I mean, I'm glad that Lori's feet are being held to the flames, but I remember I was really twisted up in bunches about, like, did the state give her an appeal, grounds for appeal in the first, 48 hours of the trial. And anyway, so yeah, but so I mean, this can go any number of ways. I do suspect that the state is holding out their best evidence. Like, I know if I were a prosecuting attorney, I would want my best evidence. I think I would want to, just kind of have my, like, front load and rear load my best evidence. So kind of, capture their confidence, capture the jury's confidence, with some compelling evidence, right out of the gate. But then I'd really want my best evidence at the tail end. So that's like freshest in their mind. In this particular case, Trina wasn't given a lot of good evidence, in my opinion. And, because of some of the really serious issues with the investigation, or lack thereof. And so if she does have really good evidence, she might have just decided, like, I have to save it for last. So I am, withholding judgment until I see her final evidence. How are you coping with things? Are you taking care of your mental health and wellness? Thank you for all the coverage and level-headedness. Thank you. Yeah, so I've mentioned this before. It's not a flex. I think my superpower is resilience. So, the tricky thing is, like, I will typically have delayed responses to things. And so, like, last night with the live, and because I'm so visual, here I am, I'm talking about Alex's house, how small it was, it's close quarters, and my brain is like, here you go, here's a picture of Tylee in that house with Alex, knowing, picking up on his disdain and stuff. And I was like, okay, that is so not helpful. But is the way I process. And I think part of the reason I catch things when I'm reading in the FOIA docs and stuff is that my brain does, like, draw pictures. It's like a movie. And And there will be times I'm reading and I'm like, and I'm, like I'm visualizing it and I'm like, wait, that doesn't make sense, and so, but yeah, so sometimes like last night, I can be kind of caught off guard a little bit, but then, you just I just have to prioritize my mental health. And so last night I closed up the live. I was hoping to get to a few more questions, and I was like, okay, nope. And just dealt with that emotion, and then I went for a long walk and got Greek food, and and so then, when I woke up this morning, I woke up fresh and was like, okay, all right, let's get back into it. So yeah, so I am holding up well. I do have just an amazing support system. I mean, really, really amazing support system. Another thing I decided to do was on the lunch breaks, I just pull away because earlier on, I was really kind of getting overheated, especially with seeing some of the witnesses, playing to the crowd. I felt like the state was playing to the crowd. I kind of felt like everyone was playing to the crowd beyond what I was comfortable with, and that can be frustrating for me because I'm like, well, people are like so distracted by these crowd pleasers that they're not picking up on my concern, which is um yeah, but the evidence, like, or the issue of the data, like not turning over the data, the issue of allowing Detective Coons to come in as an expert witness, and what looked to me like they were just cutting corners. Like, this is a high profile case. You already know that it's weak on evidence. So why take any chances? Like, why not make sure that you are doing everything by the book? Like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to, provide the defense in at least 30 days in advance with, like the qualifications, which usually takes the form of a CV. So why not provide a CV? Like, so anyway, so what I did, because I just couldn't, and I don't mean this in like any kind of self-righteous or judgmental way, because I knew that people, understandably, they were going to be focused on the crowd pleasers. So I just started leaving the courthouse at lunchtime, and I would call my daughter, and and just like get fresh air, get some good food, get some distance. And that I really noticed a big difference after I started doing that. Then today, I lost my phone in the courthouse. This is completely outside the scope of the question, but this was kind of cute. So I lost my phone in the courthouse. That part wasn't the cute part, and so I was just like, oh my gosh, where's my phone? I pull up the Find My app. Like, I went down, to where I checked in security, because I knew I was listening to music when I checked in security. So I knew I had my phone with me. And I fired up the Find My app, and I could tell it was in the courthouse. I didn't know where it was in the courthouse, but it was somewhere in the courthouse. And anyway, so I went down to security. These guys, like, they're just like messing with me. And like this one guy, he was like, oh, so they were like, no, we don't have your phone. They weren't messing with me quite yet. He was like, we don't have your phone. So I decided to leave the courthouse and just check to make sure my phone was still in the courthouse. And it was. And I asked my daughter, could you just call my phone repeatedly? I also put a message up on the phone, through the Find My app, to please text. I gave them Janice's number and stuff. Well, anyway, so someone in the cafeteria had my phone. But so then I came back into the courthouse, And so the guys in security, they were like, "Oh, you're back." And anyway, so I told him, "Yeah, they have it in the cafeteria." And this one guy, it was just so funny. He was like, "Yeah, you got really lucky because this is criminal court. So we have a lot of criminals in here. And we'll even see, that like a criminal will pick up someone's, purse or whatever and walk off." And he was like, and they're just gone. But I just thought it was so cute that he was like, this is criminal court. So we have more than the average number of criminals. But anyway, and I'd also checked like at the front desk. So like everyone was so happy for me when I finally retrieved my phone. But anyway, so you just have like moments like that where you're just like, you just find as much joy as you can in the moment. But okay. Someone said, here's my problem with protecting Melanie Pulaski. She clearly wanted her two middle kids murdered. She wanted that. How can we give her the benefit of the doubt now? Nobody thought Lori would. I give Melanie Pulaski zero benefit of the doubt. In the live where I talk about Chad's progression, like with JJ and Tammy, I came across text messages that because I couldn't follow their trials, I was finishing up grad school, really busy with work and clients and stuff. So I just had little to no time to follow the trials, but now I can search with this app. By the time I finish the app, this trial is going to be over, but we'll also have endless appeals and stuff. So I still will release the app, but anyway, so I found these text messages where Melanie Pulaski basically asked Lori, like, could we have a second pass at Brandon? Like, and her text message, Lori's text messages to Chad about her kids and Melanie's two kids. I mean, they were so reprehensible. It was like and these are in my opinion, these are very low intelligence women appealing to a low intelligent man. I don't think he was as low intelligence as they were, but also just, not the the brightest bulb in the pack. But their appeals were just like, Melanie and Brandon's son, who had to have been like maybe 4 or 5. Oh, I think he drew something. It was like crosses, and they're like, oh, he's trying to like basically like flag Satan. And then Melanie's daughter did something, and it was like she had this strength of, I think it was like 1,000 demons in whatever she did. And I was like, what is their deal with like thinking that everything like involves, I'm pretty sure it was like 1,000 demons, or just something absolutely ridiculous. And then Lori even told Chad, Melanie wants to come up to Idaho tomorrow, but I told her, no, we need to wait until next Thursday. And then the next day was when Lori and Chad had their fight, and Chad didn't reply to her text. So I think that this was a moment of clarity for Chad that unfortunately he didn't stick with. But I think he was like, what is going on? Are these women just going to show up in Idaho and expect me to murder 4 kids? Like, what is going on? And so no, I don't know how anyone would have gotten the impression that I have given Melanie Pulaski any benefit of the doubt. I have said very clearly, in my opinion, she should be waiting in jail along with her aunt, awaiting trial in the attempted murder of Brandon. The fact that Gilbert didn't charge her when, I mean, we already knew that she was in Rexburg at the time that they were planning Brandon's murder. The Gilbert police report actually gave this span, I think it was 4 days in whenever it was late September, maybe it was the 24th to the 30th, or something. It was a span of that, however many days. I think it was maybe 5 days. And then Melanie was there in Rexburg for 3 of those days. And it was these sentences were back to back. It was Melanie was in Rexburg from whatever day to whatever day. And then the next paragraph, the first sentence, it said that Lori, Chad, and Alex were planning the murder of Brandon Boudreaux. And I'm like, it's in moments like that, I'm looking for a punked camera. Am I missing something? Did you seriously put these 2 sentences back to back and you didn't include Melanie in the planning? What did you think Melanie was there for? So the fact that, there was that, and then we have these text messages, and these are just the ones that were presented in the trial. Who knows how much Gilbert police hasn't shared and may redact heavily, so we will just quite possibly never know how involved she was because they didn't charge her, and in my opinion, I think that is a much stronger conspiracy case, and but anyway, so no, there's I give her no benefit of the doubt. What I shared was my hesitation in sharing some of those details about her and Lori planning the murders of her children, and realizing just how close her kids came. I mean, I think they were within 24 hours because, and I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but we know that originally Alex was supposed to go with Melanie and Lori to Hawaii. And then the day before they were supposed to leave, Melanie tried to pick up her kids early from school, but thank God Brandon kept them out of school that day. And so Melanie wasn't able to pick up her kids. If she had, I strongly suspect Alex would have been on that trip, and it wouldn't have just been a case of judicial interference, although there would have been that. I think she would have just taken off with the kids. I think 2 of her kids were marked for murder on that trip. So, because otherwise, why would Lori have brought Alex? Certainly not to reward him. He botched, in their minds, he botched the murders of Brandon and Tammy. And the one thing Zulema said that was most believable, besides, her detailing the 7 gatherers, which, no one else could remember what the 7 gatherers were or that they were involved in it, was her description of Lori's conniption fit after Alex failed in murdering Tammy, and so the first time with a gun. And so, yeah, no, my hesitation is, again, I just know from having been in a position where at a young age, for me, it was a bee sting, being taken to the hospital. The doctor was trying to convince my foster mother that she needed to carry this special kind of pen because the next time I could actually die, because it cut off my airway and stuff. And she pushed back, but then he was like, I don't, and I remember it so clearly. He's like, I don't think you understand. Your daughter could die. But he didn't know I wasn't their daughter. I was a foster daughter, and they had absolutely no care about if I died. In fact, that would have been preferable. But so she reluctantly agreed. And then when we got in the car, I mean, I thought it was interesting that they kept me overnight because they had already resolved the issue. But they kept me overnight, and the foster parents left. Um, and and anyway, and so but when they came back the next day and picked me up, my foster mother turned around when I got in the car and said, I'm not getting you those pens. So it was like, I was like, I don't know, maybe 9 or something like that, and realized, oh my gosh, she actually wants me dead. And so I'm not making this about myself. I'm saying, having had that experience, I know just heavy what a heavy weight that is, to realize as a kid that someone doesn't, like, some parental type figure, in this case is their actual mother, who they still have visitation with, uh doesn't didn't just like have issues with you, didn't just like show favoritism, like, she actually wanted them dead, and was party to communication with these, two absolute psychopaths. And so my hesitation in sharing some of those details is, just realizing, like, Melanie's kids are old enough now that they could look up some of these details themselves. Other kids could mention it to them. And so that's the only hesitation, is just feeling just like a deep empathy for her kids. That is not the same as the benefit of the doubt, not even close. Have you Someone asked, have you seen Lori's dancing videos? No. And I hope that they will be presented, because I mean, the jury just heard today that, that was something I did want to mention. The jury heard today that Lori got married to Chad Daybell on November 5th. So I think that was the first time they've heard that that Lori remarried, and it would have been very soon after the death of their husband. So they could kind of put 2 and 2 together, like, okay, even in LDS terms, that's fast. You're talking July to November. So so that might be like, a semi suggestion that she may have been having an affair, which would support, some of the victim's claims. But I mean, the witnesses who are family and victims in that way, but not direct victims of the crime. But yeah, so we know that Charles passed these videos on to at least 2 people, Kay and Adam. He sent Adam an email with an attachment to these videos, several of these videos, in June, but there is no mention anywhere in the police report that either of them passed these videos on to law enforcement. So I do wonder if it's going to be, kind of like fruit of the cursed tree, kind of like the Amazon receipts they weren't, put in play at all in either of the trials in Idaho. And neither was the ratings document. And, I obviously question, because those 2 things also weren't ever passed on to law enforcement, if they, decided not to use that evidence. because it would open these victims up to scrutiny. I don't know, but it wasn't used. So I do wonder if the same will happen with the dancing videos. If so, I would hate to be Trina. Like, that would just really, really suck to be like, okay, this is prime evidence that she was carrying on an affair. Plus, that would be like entertainment I could actually get behind, but or crowd pleaser that I could get behind. But um, we'll see. We have a few days left, but I kind of doubt it. Okay, and then some questions from Sunday. Okay, I know you mentioned this before, but how long did it take for Adam to contact the police after Charles was shot? He didn't. So he didn't initiate contact with the police. After Detective Moffat told Kay that he didn't know if she should trust Adam, then Adam's then wife, Nicole, sent an email to Detective Moffat, but Detective Moffat was like, I want to talk to Adam. And so, yeah. But even so, it was around a month. Let me just see. Adam Cox. Let me just check my timeline here, because I know it was August. Detective Moffat asked Kay to call him to talk about Adam Cox on August 2nd. And August 8th, Nicole emailed Detective Moffat, and then Adam was interviewed the next day. Oh, okay. Someone asked, you may not want to share this right now, but if you were up to it, did you gain any insights from your visit to Joe's building? So one day last week, I visited the apartment where Joe died. Obviously, like, I didn't knock on the door or anything like that. Yeah, it was. I mean, I was glad I did it. Obviously, it was really sad. I mean, one thing that I was glad to see was, I think because his apartment was in such a state of disarray, and it was very clear he had just moved in. So Joe was meticulous, but he was also like really into design. So when he would move into a place, he would, paint it all these bougie colors. He was really into decorations and stuff. And and so, just seeing everything like the standard white walls and his apartment being in a state of disarray. I thought maybe he was kind of like in a low-income housing or something, but it was actually it was a gated community, and it was a really nice complex. But I kind of had to hang out there, and then followed someone in. I was just about to leave. I was actually waiting to leave, and there was no light, and so there were cars coming in both directions and stuff, and then someone turned in, and I was like, zoop, pulled a U-turn. So I took a video, and I was thinking about like maybe posting it, or at least having it. And and I was looking for a song, to like add to the video, and um, and none of them fit, and so like that was, that was like, I think what like kind of triggered the grief, just knowing we were estranged. I've talked about this before, but he was on my mind. And this is, I mean, I am, like so many people have rewritten history that I'm hesitant to share this, but as I'm sharing it, I will open up. Excuse me. Maybe I can even open up. Maybe I have a link to the messenger message that I sent him. I'll just see, but I definitely have a screenshot. But I'd actually probably prefer to open up Messenger, and then um, um, if I can pull it up in a reasonable amount of time, um, uh, I would just ask that the mods not message me, maybe for the next couple of minutes. Um, uh, I think I have. It's a link to the Dropbox. I know I have the the link to Messenger, but I'll just share this for now. There was actually, let me just check one more thing. But but he had been on my mind, and and so I actually, it's just one of these really, really strange details. Let me just see if, let me just check one more thing here. Yeah, I can't find it. I'll share it tomorrow, because the screenshot I have, it doesn't have like the screenshot that I had sent to him. But if one of my mods reminds me, I'll have it queued up tomorrow. But he was on my mind, and our mother had been homeless. So in New York City, she lived in the Bronx, and there was just a whole involved story about how she lost housing. And I reached out to him because she was going to lose her housing. And this is how generous he is, or was. He asked me if I would be willing to be like the intermediary. That he didn't want our mom to be on the streets, but he didn't want contact with her. And I had contact with her. And so he asked me if I would be willing to have him send me the money, and then I pay her rent. And so I was hesitant, because I was like, I don't want her to be on the streets, but at the same time, I'm now putting myself in the middle, and now I have to be the one to tell her, your son doesn't want you on the streets, but he also doesn't want to have contact with you. So I'll pay your rent through him. And it went about as well as I expected. Like, she got really angry, was yelling all these horrible things to me, and then hung up the phone. But what she didn't realize is that I was moving the next week. And this was before cell phones and stuff. And I was moving out of state, and so we just so then she was on the streets, like she was homeless. and I moved. So even if she had like kind of changed her mind and wanted to call me, that wasn't going to be a possibility. And but anyway, so I would from time to time check on her, just to see like if she was alive. And I had her date of birth because at one point she had given it to me. So I would like do this background check. There just was no record for her. At one point there was a nursing home, but I called the nursing home and they weren't familiar with her name. So I was pretty sure like she was probably taken to that nursing home at the end, but it had been a while, and they just didn't have a record of her name. But so he was on my mind. I thought, I'm just going to look her up again. So I pulled up the same URL that I had, stored. And when I pulled up her name in big red letters, and I'll show it tomorrow, it just said deceased. They don't do that anymore. Like now when I pull up her name, it doesn't have that. So I imagine people complained and were like, whoa, because it was very jarring. But it gave me, I was like, okay, he needs to know this. So I reached out to him over Messenger, to let him know. And, so many details of this case are just stranger than fiction, but most likely he was already dead when I reached out to him and was waiting to be found, so like, how do you explain that, but anyway, so as I was at his apartment complex, I was just like in the, in the car, and I thought like, oh, okay, like I've shared videos and, you share on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, whatever, and it allows you to pick music. And like I couldn't find anything, because it was like, if it was like a tribute, it was typically, kind of romantic. Even when I looked up brother, it was like, I was like, well, it didn't really, like fit our situation because we were estranged and stuff. So so I just decided, I can't, I will I will look, keep looking for a song that's kind of, um, something that's important to me, that, that will help me kind of commemorate, I don't know, but without being disingenuous, because if it's too cloying, it doesn't match. So I don't know what that will be, but yeah. So I don't know. I personally, I don't believe in closure. I just don't. I don't believe in closure. I don't believe in grief cycles. I have to be careful not to be reactive. When I was interviewing, I was like, oh, if one more person asked me, like, do you think this will give you closure? I was just always wanting to say, I just don't think there's any such thing. I think it's like a pipe dream. And I don't want to like even have an expectation that I'm going to have closure, because I don't want to be disappointed. I think you just feel the way you feel until you don't feel that way anymore. And then you get some distance and you don't have, like some of those feelings kind of, even out. But then something, like very unexpected can happen. And you feel those feelings again, like seeing the house that, you just how small the house was that Tylee was in with Alex, And so anyway, so yeah, that was my trip to Joe's apartment. I know I probably should, like, I knew that like a lot of people, they they are better at kind of putting a more flowery spin on things. And that's kind of at the heart of like, a lot of true crime shows and stuff, like everyone always sings their last words to someone before, they died, where I love you. And I remember someone asking me, what were your last words to Tylee? And I was like, well, she was the one who drove to the airport, I imagine they were like, goodbye, like, I don't know what the last words were because I didn't know they were going to be my last words, So anyway, okay. Now let me try to find the questions again. Okay. How long after Charles' last text did Adam try to contact Charles? I think he sent 2 more text messages. It was like 1 or 2 after Charles, said, do what, you do whatever you will do, or something like that. It was kind of ominous. And Charles was already dead. So after that, yeah, we don't know. Yeah. Don't you think it's relevant to this case that Alex had been convicted of attacking Lori's third husband? Well, yeah, of course. It is unjust that the jury will not hear this. Well, I mean, I do understand. They can't be prejudicial. So that's the fine line that they're walking. And I do, like, I'm emotionally involved in this case, but I really appreciate it anytime, prosecutors, defense attorneys, and judges support the Constitution and support a defendant's constitutional right to a fair trial, because it minimizes the chances of appeal. So there's no way that that would be pertinent, especially since they didn't even investigate his death. So yeah, I mean, speaking as the sister of her third husband, yeah, I think it's absolutely pertinent, but the law doesn't allow that, and I think that that's fair. Do Tylee's friends that are on the witness list know about Charles' death? Like, did Tylee tell them? Yeah, we know that her friends, some of her friends actually came to the house because they couldn't get a hold of her because Lori had taken her phone. But yeah, they knew about Charles' death. Is Annie saying Adam lied about being at those family gatherings? No, I didn't say that. I mean, I'm honestly confused by what you said about Alex and the family gathering. Well, that's not a question. Did Lori ever text you for the hospital all the hours she sat at Tylee's bedside? If this illness went on for years, why has no one else's memories of those long hospital stays Lori told Colby about? No, she never texted me. Did Joe ever mention that Lori died when giving birth to Tylee? No, and Lori never mentioned it either. I mean, even when she was telling me about, all these wild things about the end times and all this, like, she hadn't met Chad yet. And so I think all the near-death experience garbage that came in with Chad, and Chad got it from Julie Rowe. So, and then all of a sudden it was just vogue in this group to all have NDEs. Why has no one checked to see if Jason Mel called someone at the police station after Charles was shot? They did investigate him. Okay. With all due respect, was Joe cremated? Yes, he was. What happened to Joe's belongings? They got rid of them. How did Lori's parents treat Colby, Tylee, and JJ? I didn't really see them interact with with JJ. But also keep in mind, like JJ, he kind of moves in parallel to people. So, um, uh, yeah. So I don't, that just didn't stand out to me. They weren't there very long the last time I was there, and most of the time they were just like focused on like talking to me. Like they wanted me to check out the LDS temple in my neighborhood. And I mean, no disrespect to LDS, but I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. But, they were telling me how beautiful it was and all this. And I'm sure it was. But, so I think they were like kind of trying to quasi evangelize me to LDS. But I have talked before about how there were 2 times that Tylee, because Tylee stayed near us or in the room most of the time I was there. Like I was really surprised how much she hung out with us. And but there were 2 times where I saw Tylee leave in direct response to something. One was when Lori asked me if I wanted to see the pictures from Colby's wedding. Tylee left. And that's why I was, like specifically looking for Tylee in the pictures. And I have consistently said that from the beginning, from January 2020, when I was in a Facebook group. But the other time was when Barry and Janice came over. Like Tylee walked into the room, greeted them barely. They greeted her, and then she went to her room, and she didn't come out until they were gone. So, that could have meant something. It could have meant nothing. But there didn't seem to be a strong connection, but I might, have been drawing conclusions that, shouldn't have been drawn. It was just notable to me that she didn't hang out with us when they were there. But okay, you know what? I'm going to move on to there was one question. There's a question I saw. I'll answer this. How did you help your daughter get through this? Her Lolo murdering the children. I have 2 sons. I'm not sure how I would handle it. Actually, no, I'm not going to answer that because I don't want to tell someone else's story. Okay, so the questions from tonight. All right. Surely the prosecution will be using the body cam of Charles in January when he was afraid Lori was going to kill him. I hope so. Yeah, I hope so, but we haven't seen it yet. Do you know why or from what Zulema was given immunity in the Idaho case? I remember it being mentioned in Chad's trial. Yeah, I mean, we don't know the details, but apparently they convinced her that they had enough on her to possibly charge her as an accomplice, maybe even in the death of Alex. We just don't know. But they had enough on her that she agreed to speak candidly on the basis of immunity, but it was limited use immunity, meaning, very simply put, like if they could prove that she lied, then she would lose that immunity. And I think that's the only reason we found out about the 7 gatherers. anything else? I mean, I still think she was lying through her teeth on a lot of these details, but they were probably lies that they couldn't prove. Because obviously all of these people were, like they go to such ridiculous lengths to try to distance themselves. And even last week, like when Serena and I think also Christina were testifying, uh, like it's like now they couch this as they were casting out evil spirits, and that's that's biblical, so they were just doing a biblical thing. But you have to understand, we have from Ian who codified this group's beliefs. No, not intentionally. He wrote a document to give to their lawyer when he decided, what, I'm not cooperating with this investigation anymore. He told his wife that he had worn a wire and all this. So her lawyer understandably was like, we're going to know exactly what you told law enforcement. And so Ian, who I would say was the most intelligent one in this group, um, had like written out this whole document. And the first part of it was a narrative explaining their beliefs. And then he actually added an outline, which I appreciated, because like all through high school and college, I always took notes in outline form. And so I found that helpful. It just so happened that it was on a laptop that he gave to one of his kids, and his ex-wife found it and turned it over to Brandon. And then it went to the media, and, much to Ian's chagrin. But between that and, some of the other documentation around their beliefs and Melanie Gibbs' interview with Dateline, we know that when someone was declared a zombie, so originally it was just like the person was overtaken by a dark spirit. In the case of Charles, originally it was this Ned Schneider, which, quick aside, that came from Lori, because we know from Chad's Google searches that he originally must have thought his name was Ned Snyder, and that's why there was all this back and forth. Is it Ned? Is it Nick Schneider? Is it Ned Snyder? Is it Ned Schneider? Well, originally he thought it was Ned Snyder, and he did these Google searches for Ned Snyder, Louisiana, and the year he died, because this Ned Schneider was actually a friend of Charles. So the story was that when he died, his at some point his spirit overtook Charles, and so that's how Charles became Ned Schneider. Obviously, the logic breaks down, because it was like, well, he died before Lori and Charles even got married, so he would have been, but maybe their thinking was, all this time, this many years, he was like this disembodied spirit, and then in January 2019 took over Charles' body. But originally, Chad searched for Ned Snyder, and 1 year, and then it was like maybe 2 days later, updated his search to Ned Schneider and the actual year that he died. That search was done on the same day that Lori and Charles had their big blow up fight. So basically, Lori, what it looks like is Lori told Chad, all right, this is the deal. He had this friend, Ned Schneider. Chad was a doofus, didn't take good notes. was Googling Ned Snyder, probably circled back to Lori, hey, I can't find anything about a Ned Snyder dying in, whatever year he died. And she's like, no, it's Ned Schneider, and he died this year. So then he updates his Google search, and that, I believe, was the same day that, let me see. Yeah. Okay. So I have it right here in the timeline. So on January 28th, Chad searches 3 Google searches to research Ned Snyder, Snider. That's how much of a doofus he is. Who he believes was born in 1951 and died in 1996. You can check my timeline. I always link to sources unless it's a confidential source, and then I know it's a confidential source. But there's a link. The links always, go to some screenshot, usually a screenshot or a PDF or a video or something like that. The first search, Ned Snyder, 1996, death, Louisiana. The second search, Ned Snyder, Louisiana, born 1951, died 1996. Third search, bodies possessed after original occupant dies. Then, that was the 28th. Then the 30th, he conducts a Google search for Ned Snyder, Louisiana, obituary, 1997. He gets his confirmation that Ned Snyder died and had an obituary for that confirmed he died in 1997. And then that morning, he calls Lori. Melanie was at Lori's home when Chad called, of course, because they were practically married themselves, and said, ta-da, Charles was overtaken by an evil spirit by the name of Ned Snyder, which is when everything blew up. And then she also went with Lori to hide. Someone picked up Charles' truck from the airport, brought it to the house. Then Lori and Melanie hid his truck and his clothes and all that stuff. So you can see, like, every step of the way, Lori was leading from behind. But anyway, so yeah, I forget how that tied into Zulema, but there you go. Do you think the jury is getting close to asking, is Tylee going to be able to give us some testimony? Yeah, that's really the $1 million question, because here she was with Lori. They haven't shown any of her testimony, like any of the video. They can't. It's hearsay. And then, we still have a few days left, but if she doesn't, I imagine that will be a question, but I don't think it's a question they will be allowed to bandy about. I don't know. I don't know. Any reaction by Lori to autopsy photos? I don't know. I didn't have a good view of Lori today at all, just with where I was sitting. Did Lori not make a point of seeing Alex standing at Charles' feet right before she left the house? Makes me think she could have taken the final shot and wants to hang it on Alex. I do question if Lori took the final shot. I think it's pretty well established that I don't just question these things because I think it's going to be a crowd pleaser. I have no problem going one against the wind on some of my theories if I think that they're plausible. But I think the thing that makes me question if it was Lori, one, finding out from the ME today that having been shot in the heart, that Charles most likely would have only lived for seconds to 2 minutes tops. I mean, these witnesses, I mean, these um, experts, they're very careful to explain, like they couch things, they put parameters, they're always outliers. So they very rarely ever say, yes, it was definitely this. They say the evidence indicates it was a shored wound because of these things. He did go so far as to say it was textbook. It was a textbook shored wound, which I really, really appreciated. I was like, good, that gives me additional confidence, because just like the scarring in the flooring, at least when Lori showed it, because it didn't have the pool of blood, it just didn't look as significant. I don't know what pictures she had, because she showed divots that were farther away from the uh, from the scarred flooring. But and you could actually see the exit wound. But for the second shot, again, it's going to get a little graphic here. So if you're uncomfortable with graphic details, you know, maybe put it on pause. Just going to take a drink here. And excuse me, I think this is my fourth cough drop. But but he I would imagine someone who is taller. So we know Alex was 6'2". um for him to be as tall as he was, and I mean, obviously a terrible shot, like for distances, but given how close he was to Alex for the first shot, and then we already know now the medical examiner didn't testify to this today, which I was kind of surprised by. But the fire captain had noted that there was very little bleeding from the second wound, and he also didn't testify to this, if this was the same fire captain, the one who testified last week, because for whatever reason they redacted the fire captain's name in the FOIA doc. But he noted that there was very little bleeding from the second wound. So then I looked that up, asked ChatGPT, why is that notable? Like, does that indicate something? And ChatGPT said, yes, it actually indicates that the victim was quite possibly already dead or severely incapacitated, like very close to dead, because the heart wasn't pumping. So for the first wound, there was a lot of bleeding. There was a pooling, like in his neck and stuff, because the heart was still pumping. So there was more blood. In the second wound, then there was very little blood when Charles was moved. So that's another thing that makes me wonder if Lori took the second shot. So first of all, I would think someone who's taller, more comfortable with guns, well, why would it have been such a shallow trajectory, or what the ME referred to as a wound path? Like it entered the abdomen, exited the the shoulder. That I would think someone who's tall, comfortable with a gun, it's just going to be like more of a straight shot, not so shallow. And so and then just like the fact that Charles was quite possibly already dead or close to death, like and even just Chad's like Lori's testimony to, I don't know, it wasn't testimony, it was like a text message, I think to to Alex, and maybe to Melanie, like, I am told I will be like Nephi, and I think Nephi was the one who actually killed Layman, or whatever his name was. And she told Alex, and so will you. And so that was another thing that made me wonder if she took the second shot. But it's really more so just the unusual, in my opinion, the unusual wound path, and just how shallow it was. And excuse me, but we'll never know because they didn't do gunshot residue testing. So, and then I've said this before, I wondered, even with the tribute pictures that Summer posted on Facebook, just the fact that just floated a picture out there, like, here's Ty Lee at a gun range. She has the the protective glasses on and stuff, and it just seemed like such a passive aggressive messaging of just saying, Ty Lee also was comfortable around guns. So yeah, I'm I don't know, there are, yeah, those things just make me wonder if Lori took the second shot. And I think I can imagine Lori, just as petty as she was, as sadistic as she was. I even experienced at a much smaller scale, obviously, just how sadistic she was. So I can imagine her wanting to take that shot. Okay. I also, I don't know, this might be kind of out there. Won't be the first time, probably won't be the last. But even that detail that Chad shared about shooting the raccoon, I've also wondered if he also just wanted to have that feeling of having shot a person, even though I definitely believe Ty Lee was already dead when they brought her to the property. But yeah, so it just, these are the things that kind of run through my head. Like, Lori's so manic. Did she tell him about how exhilarating it was, and he also wanted to have that feeling? Who knows? But it was a strange detail, and it does seem like he wanted to account for possibly someone hearing a gunshot. So I don't know. I can imagine that they both would have really kind of gotten off on that. Did Lori not make a point of seeing? Oh yeah, okay, that was already the question. Oh yeah, so the question was, makes me think she could have taken the final shot. Will they show messages between she and Chad? I don't know. I kind of doubt it. I think the only way they'll be able to bring, I think it's called 505B evidence. I forget the terminology for it. I think it was if she chose to testify, she took the risk of opening that door. Why can't they use any of the videos of Charles, as the victim can't his words stand? There, apparently it's hearsay. So I don't know if that also counts for the victim. I didn't research that. But when I first heard about the hearsay ruling, I just thought that was so strange. And then I had a whole series of questions with ChatGPT, and was like, I was really surprised to find out, oh, wow, okay. Yeah, so the rationale is, because I was thinking, like, it's not someone just reporting that this is what, Tylee said, or, Charles said, or whatever, because they were captured on video. But if the person isn't alive, like the defendant has a right to question the accuser. So if the and I'm not sure I understand all the nuances, um, but if the person can't be questioned, like they can't take the witness stand, then it counts as hearsay. So, and today, Lori was just being really daft. Like at one point, I leaned over to Janice and was like, "Please explain to me again how people think that this woman is so intelligent." I mean, Trina was just like, "Objection, objection, objection, objection," and the judge kept, like sustaining the objections, but it was the same thing, and they were very fair objections, and it was just like, are you are you this dumb? Like, are you not getting it? Or do you think that you're just going to like keep slipping this question in? Because she wasn't even like varying the question. So it was just ridiculous, and I was like, I think at this point she's like starting to panic, like there are things that she wants to get in, and it's like the law doesn't allow for it, so I did wonder at some point if she was just trying to get things in, knowing that it would be objected to, but that there would be objections, but she just still wanted the jury to hear it. But yeah, it was weird. She's dumb as dirt. Is it public knowledge why Adam and Nicole divorced? No. And yeah, people have shared, but I don't share that stuff. That's not tea in my mind. I have heard some things, but yeah, I mean, even though Adam is, involved in this whole thing, they still have a right to privacy. It's not germane to the case. Annie, do you think Lori will testify? It's so hard to know, because like this is one of those situations where it's just like, I've described trying to predict her choices, like playing chess with a chimp, like you're moving these pieces and then suddenly the chimp just starts eating the board, and so it is nearly impossible to predict. If she is smart, she will not testify. Or if she is at all open to her counsel, she won't testify. I mean, we saw what she did in Idaho. I'd love for her to testify, because I would love for all that. I would just love for her to push that door open and bring in all the evidence from Idaho. But I think she would be dumber than I even think that she is. And I don't have a high opinion of her intelligence, not just because I think, she's a despicable human being. It's it's an honest assessment. There are lots of despicable human beings who are criminals who got caught, who had a modicum of intelligence. I think with some of the witnesses, she has asked better questions. It seems like the witnesses where she doesn't have like they weren't friends, or it wasn't someone who went on a date with Charles. Like because she is so emotional and has so little control over her emotions, she can't help herself. Like when she was questioning, who was it? One of her friends. Um, she's just asking all these stupid questions about when have you last. I think maybe it was Christina. I'm not sure now. But it was like, how often do you talk to Zalema? And how often do you talk to Serena? And I'm like, why don't you just ask them when they last went to your favorite Mexican restaurant? Like, so it was just very strange when she's questioning someone who's a professional. It seems like she's better prepared. She has like specific questions. She's probably more open to input from her advisory council, because some of the questions I'm like, that kind of sounds more intelligent than she is. Excuse me. But yeah. Yeah. But I think we see the real Lori in how she questioned the civilian witnesses. I'm like, that's the petty, unintelligent woman I've seen. Excuse me. Do you think the jury probably does know all the details about this case? How could they not? I do suspect some of these people, they really just want to be part of a big case like this. I mean, the one juror was on his phone during the trial, um, and they didn't check his phone, to verify. So, um, yeah, I know that they're questioned. At least in Idaho, the jury was questioned every day, to confirm that they haven't followed any of the news, or things like that. There was a mention today about Janice and Summer. Like, it sounded, now this is when I was looking for my phone, so I wasn't in the room at this time, and I actually went back pretty soon after it started, but the bailiff was convinced that there weren't any empty seats, and there was. I knew from a text message from Janice that there was. But anyway, I just listened to it as I sat outside the courthouse. But so I think that this is when this was brought up. But there was something about Janice and Summer having watched a video, and so I don't want to jump to conclusions, especially because I didn't hear that, and I should have asked Janice about it. But if it's what I think it is, if it's like if they pulled a Melanie Pulowski, because Melanie was like, "Oops, I watched a video," but if it's something like that, and I don't know that it sure came across that way. Yeah, I hope they hold him in contempt, but I don't know. I need to ask about that. Huh. This is the another $1 million question. Do you think any of the others, the Melanies and others, will ever face justice? No, I don't. I don't. When I was in Rexburg in 2022, I asked two detectives if there was any chance of anyone else being charged, and they said no, that is highly unlikely. Okay. Nope, definitely want to skip over that question. Thank you. Whatever mod flagged, whatever. Yeah, flagged one question. There's one question I just need to give some thought to. I heard no body cam videos can be used because it would be hearsay, since Charles can't testify. That's what I assume as well. Like, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, but I don't know. It's not something I've actually researched. Oh. Anna said, please help this lady with your lipstick use and brands or colors. Okay, so I just happened to have the pencil in front of me. I didn't know that this was going to be asked. I just reapplied it right before I went on, but didn't do my full routine. So I will put a post out on I'll put a post out on the be looking on the community tab, and I will do it tonight because I keep forgetting. But it was like a like a collection of lip liners. Langman, like there might be an A. Langmanny lip liner. But yeah, I'll look it up on it. I'm pretty sure I bought these on Amazon. This one is my favorite. I don't know what the color is though, because it doesn't say on it. But I mean, this color just works for me. But obviously, I did a bad job with my lips because I didn't I didn't go over it with the actual lipstick. I was running behind because I had to do some client work. But anyway, it doesn't look like velvet tonight, but yeah. But I mentioned last week that my daughter gave me this tip of like using like not a pencil liner. You can't use a pencil liner. It has to be one that's like, kind of a soft tip, and you just like color in your lips and then go over it with lipstick, and then I go over it with a lip gloss because that's what I learned from my daughter. And when I do all three, it lasts really well. But I didn't do the lipstick that went over it tonight, and so anyway, but I will write a post. Okay. Do you believe Charles knows, and there's a typo, that Joe was killed by them or suspected it? Yeah, definitely. Because, I mean, I always suspected, but when he was interviewed on, I think, what was that, January 30th, I think, or 31st, and he was talking to Gilbert police, he said about Lori that she said, that he said to them, she said, I'm going to kill you too. And he moved on. So he didn't want to expound on that, which that made me think, okay, like I would have led with that. Like if I knew that someone who threatened me actually killed another person, I would have led with that. Like I know she's capable of it because she killed her previous husband. So the fact that he didn't go down that line, he didn't expound on that, and the patrol officers he talked to either didn't catch it or suffered from a deplorable lack of curiosity. It just wasn't. It wasn't questioned. Like, well, because ostensibly he was the first person she ever threatened. So why would he say that she said, I'm going to kill you too? So yeah, I think I think he knew. I think she had something on him, because even when he filed the petition for divorce, he withdrew it. And I know that, family members have said, oh, it's because he was just hopelessly in love and, said love always wins. I do not think that is the case at all. Um, because he withdrew the divorce petition and that day withdrew JJ from his school here in Phoenix and moved to Houston. That is a very dramatic action. And sometimes I think because this case is so bizarre, like sometimes we can really lose sight of some of the, some of the details. Like imagine something spooking you so badly, you withdraw the petition, but then you grab your child and you move to another state. And JJ needed services. And so it's not even like it was like, like moving a teenager who didn't have special needs, which would still be extremely disruptive. Like he went to school, that day and didn't know he wouldn't be going to school there anymore. And JJ thrived on routine, so this was a very, very, very drastic action for Charles to take. So sometimes I think, people like they'll see one thing, but it's not in context, and they'll be like, oh, he withdrew the petition. Oh, love always wins. I don't mean to make fun of it, even though I'm not a fan of that sentiment, because I think this case proves love doesn't always win. Like lots of things prove love doesn't always win unless you're like, like you have religious beliefs that where you think ultimately love will always win. But here, no, love just doesn't always win. So I already just kind of have an issue with that. But I don't think Charles thought that, because this wasn't a love always wins action. This was, in my mind, something spooked him and he felt pressured to withdraw the petition, but he felt in significant danger and felt JJ was in enough danger that he just got up. He just up and moved to Houston that same day. So I don't know if Lori had something on him, because one solid pattern with Lori is she makes sure everyone's hands get dirty, because then she can silence them, and so so I'm not suggesting that he was part of the plan to murder Joe. In fact, I suspect Joe was murdered while he was in Louisiana for his mother's death. Ugh, it's too late. But so yeah, so I don't think he was he had was part of it. I do think that he was murdered, but I think that Charles probably knew enough that he didn't feel, even though he was really afraid for his life. It seemed he was, all that time, he was very afraid for his life, but not afraid enough to tell police what he knew. That's what I suspect. So yeah, it's it's just there are so many layers of tragedy to this story. But okay, all right, on that note, we're going to wrap up, and we'll plan to do this again tomorrow night, and I will post about the lipstick. And if one of my mods can remind me, I do just want to show the messenger exchange, because there are so many weird details with this case. And if there's a way for me to, like, you know, I'll have to see if I can hide like other other messages, because you see these previews and stuff. So I'll check that out tonight or tomorrow in court. But I just feel like there are so many bizarre claims that people have made. I remember one person claiming that she knew details about how the kids died because Charles' spirit stayed with her from the time he died to the time the kids' bodies were found. I mean, there have just been so many strange claims made around this case that I feel somewhat, like hesitant about, like this detail, because it was very strange, but it was, I mean, it happened. So it's not something I would make up. But anyway, so I'll also try to remember to pull that together. And if there's no way that I can, especially because I don't have two screens here, so if I were home, I could have, part of that part of Messenger off screen. But I'll just play around and see if I can do it, and if so, I'll just show the, well, I can't even call it an exchange. It was a one-sided message. But anyway, okay. On that note, have a great night, and we will talk tomorrow.